So what I'm doing now is I'm just going to I've not really looked at Guitar Pro 8 since they came out with like the official version. So there are a couple things that they changed visually since the alpha. But now, see, when I was alpha testing this, I didn't have the information of, oh, here are the new features. They just cut us loose and just said, basically, test out the program. We're not exactly asking for like critiques of I like this or I don't like this. We're not asking for that, but rather just, does this work or does this not work? And please report a bug if you see one. So I blindly went into the alpha test, and it was mostly finished by that point. I would say they've made minor changes compared to what the alpha test was when we started to what it seems to be right now. They're still big compared to what it was just a couple of months ago, but compared to Guitar Pro as a whole, they're big for me because I work in Guitar Pro as like a job. My paycheck kind of hangs on it, so I am tedious about it, but overall it was still a good program. These are just some really nice tweaks. So if you kind of think about it that way, that is probably a more accurate way to look at it. But anyways, so this is my Guitar Pro 8 window. I might try and open 7 for you really quick just so that you can see what 7 looks like comparatively. So, okay, that's 7.6. That's like, I've mostly used 7.5, 7.6 over the past couple of years for a lot of my transcription work for Jerry Douglas, Tommy Emmanuel, Andy McKee, Gareth Pearson, John Knowles. I've mostly done that in 7.5 or beta versions subsequently. So, yeah, I'll just kind of flip back and forth between that's the differences in those menus. So Guitar Pro 8. One of the big features that's new with this is the ability to export PNG. So that would be really useful maybe if you were, like let's say you worked in publishing or were a content creator. I would imagine that the ability to use the PNGs would be pretty useful if you were maybe doing video editing or uploading to websites. That's just one little step to make this just look more polished and be taken more seriously in the realm of transcription softwares. Because I think for a long time Guitar Pro has been seen as for the past couple years, I've been seeing people use it professionally. So TrueFire uses it as kind of their standard for the interactive files. Some of their files I do believe were done in Sibelius or Finale just by the looks of the PDFs. But the interactive files that you see, many times those are, when I've worked with them, they were Guitar Pro files. So anyways, you have that. They've just, I don't know, just done a little bit more advanced UX, UI design. I'm kind of talking out of my butt. But seems like they've done a little bit better of a job like making that visually appealing, but I think the file search option is maybe just fancier. So yeah, let's get into the actual program. At the moment what we're looking at is 7.6, and you can see it's already fussing at me that this is a document that I've opened with the new version, so it's giving me that little notice. And then here's one. These are just some arrangements of mine that are in progress at the moment, so you can see, like, the idea is mostly sketched out. It's not quite playable yet, but it's mostly there. But I like 7.5, and I use that professionally over the past few years because, you see right here, it really gives me a lot of control over my typefacing and the ability to just make it a bit more beautiful, and and you have these design controls as well to, like, let's say, I don't want to mess up my document, but like if you had a lot of stuff that was just like that could be squished, you could squish it pretty easily, kind of like classical piano stuff, save you a bunch of pages if page number is a concern for you, like if you're printing in analog, don't want to waste paper. So you have that option to like really play with the measures here. That it's not the most, like, there are programs that will allow you to kind of play with like note for note, So as you can see, like 7.5, 7.6 gives you a good bit of control over that kind of spacing information. So you can make it, like let's say I thought this was too jumbled, I could just clean it up and turn it into 3, and then I could press this little circle right here, and then it would even out, in its own way, it would kind of even out the spacing between the notes and just kind of give it what it thinks, what the program thinks is an equal share of the measure. So I'll just undo that because I trust that I had it somewhat organized. There we go. Thereabouts. Anyways, so, you know, those are some things that I like about it, and you can see I've not really done much with the publishing information yet, but it, you know, it's kind of like Microsoft Word by the docx stage, where you can really make something that looks pretty decent. You can control the fonts on a lot of things, control the size of the text, and, you know, I've got the chord names kind of tiny here. That's just something that I need to fix in the template. That's not really, like, that's just my choice that I did that, that I need to fix. But, yeah, I mean, you've already, just with 7.5, 7.6, you have a lot of control over complex score information. And so you have automations to control tempos. You can add DSL coda to coda, second time to coda. You can, like, second time to coda, that's something that, like, you can add, like, as much as a double coda. And you can add those kind of, like, really complex, like, dial signal to signal, double coda. Like, you can do all this kind of crazy stuff, and you probably won't ever use most of it. But you have the option to do a lot of that. I've not found a way to do something like second time to coda. Maybe I'm missing it. Maybe I'm just having a blonde moment. But otherwise, it's pretty incredible what it's already able to do. And there are very few instances where I've run across something that they didn't already think of in terms of my ability to transcribe for my clients. Because I have some clients that kind of test the limits of this program. So, you know, I'm really a fan of the program. I could go on for days about how much I appreciate this program and how good it's been to me and how great the team are and how much they actually have listened during my various nosy rants with the beta. So anyways, here's the new one. Here's the new one. These are the exact same files. And you can see it's still, like, you know, on this copper line one, it still looks mostly the same. So it opens pretty similarly. I've got the details hidden. So I've got them all popped up right here in 7.6. Let me manifest them. So I hope my screen recorder controls aren't too much in the way, but there are a lot of, most things are still in the same spot, but there are some new details here which I'll go through in just a second. But otherwise, still looks pretty good. I didn't feel like it was a huge learning curve switching to the new one, so I was happy about that. I was very happy about that. They look relatively similar in terms of how the tabs themselves show up. One of the things that I have seen just from playing with this for a second, and like, it's still basically the same tab, you know what I mean? So that I have design mode on here, but anyways, so like if I take that off, I don't know why that's stuck. There we go. So yeah, like if you look at them, exact same file. It's just that you get more metadata here, and you have a lot more, like, fine-tuning control. So I imagine once I really dig in with Guitar Pro, I'm already seeing some features that will probably manifest a little bit differently in, like, Guitar Pro 8 version than they would in, you know, 7.5, 7.6. So, for starters, it's got different voicings already. So, I would say Gp8 has nicer, more high definition. Like, I'm listening through a pretty decent little preamp here, so this is the Apogee 1. But, it makes things easier to hear. So, if you're listening through a good preamp, I think that makes a difference. But, yeah, I'll insert a sample at some point. Yeah, okay, so what they've done, it's still Steel Mart, which is kind of like a Martin Dreadnought type voicing. so I've assigned that to this particular track, and they've upgraded the noise on it, like the quality of the voice. So very quickly, I'll I don't know. I like the new voices. I feel like they're pretty decent. They're not too twangy sounding, and it feels like it's just more audio information, you know. So probably it's going to take up a little bit more space on your computer because of that, but it wouldn't be a deal breaker, you know. It's not like, it's nowhere near like the footprint that Ableton would leave on your computer, or even Google Chrome, to be honest. So it's still a pretty lightweight program in spite of all that. And like you see, I'm on a standard MacBook Air. You can probably hear that my computer's out of breath right now, but I'm running a video recording software. I'm running 2 versions of Guitar Pro, and I have Google Chrome up, and I've got no mods to my computer to make it high performance. This is just a standard MacBook that's a couple years old now, and you know, I'm not quite in the market yet for a new one. Like, I'm not to that point yet, but I probably will upgrade in the next few years. But I do have to really budget my space. I'm not in a position where I'm just downloading all the things. So, yeah, the other thing I want to talk about now that's my personal favorite so far is the fact that there's this little thingy over here that you can clearly see, which is, that's where you can import new tracks. And so I don't want to play this because it might cause some demonetization issues. I just got monetized, so they probably won't flag the tab. But anyways, so you can see, this is kind of what the tab looks like so far. It's a work in progress, so it's kind of a mess right now. And then it's also a shuffle beat, so it's like a 12/8 sort of feel for at least as far as I've transcribed. So it's not going to look quite as easy to read, I don't think, as maybe a 4/4 time. But I think one of the interesting things about, one of the big changes, I would say, so on that subject of this being a little bit harder to read, one of the big changes that really just knocks Guitar Pro 8 out of the park for me is the fact that in this one, like, let's say you do have a track like this that's a bit difficult to read because the notes are spaced closely together in a way that the program thinks makes sense. So like maybe let's take something down here just as an example, back to Copperline, and like let's find something that maybe could be spaced out a little bit better because I've got a lot of weird things going on in this song. Okay, so let's look at this. That could probably take up a little bit more space. So what I could do here, what I can do here is activate my design mode, which I'm doing Control-Option-D to access this. And just remember, if you're working in Guitar Pro and you can't access some of the features, check to make sure that you're toggling design mode back off after you use it, because it will hinder the ability to use certain features. So anyways, this is very new. This is my first time trying it. This is great. Like, I'm gonna have to redo some tabs just because I'm excited about this. Like, there's some tabs I can think of that could look much better. So yeah, I'm exceptionally stoked about that. Especially, like, it's just hard to notate guitar sometimes. Like, we do some weird things on the fretboard, and so this is the best use case I can think of this is when you have, like, let's say you've got little grace notes here and there that are just, they need more space, but they don't really take up much space and time for the program to think like, oh, I need to like highlight this part. So it needs more space than it actually takes up in time. So to be able to really fine tune that, especially as you see right here, I've got fingerings that are present. I use fingerings when I transcribe. I know not everybody else does, but I include it because I want people to be able to really trust the tab as a reliable source of, like, everything where it needs to be, so that you don't have to run off and like go watch a video just to get a ballpark estimate of what the song should feel like. I want tabs to have enough information self-contained in them that that you don't have to use a video reference if you don't want to, and you can still come out pretty close to what the artist is doing. So that's my goal as a transcriber. And that, for me, one of the specific ways that I accomplish that is by including fingerings where they happen. So my rule of thumb is, like, let's say you've got verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. What I'll do is the first time you see the intro, I'll include the fingerings on that. And then if that riff pops up again, maybe as a tagline or a refrain, I'll just kind of leave it as is. And if there's an alteration somewhere in it as it repeats, then I'll include the fingering for that alteration. But there's a biblical... And then for the verse, like, I'll include the fingerings for the verse, and then include the fingerings for the chorus, and then include the fingerings for the bridge and the outro. If there's anything in there that's like a direct repeat of something else, I just won't include fingerings for that, because I'm operating by a biblical interpretation technique called the law of first mention, which is basically, if you're reading the Bible and, for instance, someone mentions a dove, and a dove is associated with the concept of peace, anytime after that you see a dove mentioned, it's usually also used as a literary tool to represent peace. So just kind of going off of that logic, this is just something I came up with because it just makes sense to me, and it feels akin to parallelism in grammar. It just feels like it's along those lines of reasoning. So no one told me to do this. It's just something that I do that I think makes tabs a little bit easier to understand. But also, from my perspective, I'm not cluttering up the page with way too many fingerings, and I'm not introducing fingerings to make the reader think like, oh, there's like new material, I have to learn it a different way now. Like, I feel like if I say the fingerings once, it should be the same unless I dictate otherwise. So that's relevant here because sometimes even after following that rule, like, that rule in part exists so that I'm not cluttering it up with too many fingerings. But having this as an option allows me to, like you see, I've got ghost notes, a hammer-on, upstroke, downstroke, let ring. I've got all of these little expression details right here and fingerings. And you really see it more when you export to PDF where there's crowding and stuff around the notes. But that really allows me to make sure there's no crowding so that there's nothing hiding behind each other. So I'm really excited about that in particular. And also there are some measures, like you see this one, I might be able to turn this into 3 measures by like really toggling each note. If I don't want to in this particular case because this whole section makes sense on its own, and that's kind of like, it's its own sentence really. So to have that on a separate line, I'm fine with in this particular instance, but there are cases where I don't want to waste this much paper for just 2 lines, So to be able to like add back another one and then drag it to make sure that there's plenty of space, that's really helpful. And that probably shaves down 5% of the time yeah, when you're talking about like hours and hours and hours, 5% matters. But yeah, so most of the stuff that they've included are time savers. I want to be very clear about that, and stuff that if you use this a lot, it will make your job so much faster. So that's the tone of most of these edits. I'd say that I've mostly covered my favorites so far with this, but one of the other things that I wanted to see between version 7.5 and version 8 was a little bit more advanced notation of piano, because I'm a piano player. I feel like it can be very useful to piano players if they know it's a tool for piano. Because even in the classical world, there's still paywalls on public domain stuff, and that's neither here nor there. But like people are paying to do classical stuff anyway, so there's a market for it, as I guess what I'm arguing. But I have transcribed a great deal of piano stuff with this tool, just honing my own skills. So I've transcribed Scott Joplin, Maple Leaf Rag. I did a version of that. You'll see it further back on my channel, where I took a piano player role that was allegedly Scott Joplin, and I took the sheet music of Scott Joplin and rewrote the sheet music to match that player piano role. And there were a lot of things missing from it that weren't in the like official sheet music. I don't know if it was just notated like that and signed. I have no idea. But they are completely different performances. So I notated that with piano, but I've also since then notated a lot of Chopin stuff that I personally want to learn and want to get better at. And I know some of them, but I could know more. And I wanted to see it interactive, and I wanted to hear it through a transcribing software so that I could hear what do these syncopations sound like without rubato of Artur Rubinstein's interpretation, or Vladimir Ashkenazy, or Yuzha Wang's interpretation, because they're playing it how they feel. But when I need to learn this, I want to learn it 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 at that steady sort of tempo, so that I can get a grasp of how the song works. And so I transcribed a lot of piano into Guitar Pro probably December of this year, or last year. Oh, that's not it. I'll tell you what, when I put it on Squarespace for sale, I'm done with it, apparently. Where did I put these? Okay, so let's take all these .gp files. So this is like the whole suite of Chopin stuff that I retranscribed. And so these I transcribed. Like, I didn't finish any projects during the alpha test, because I didn't want to mix up work with like something that was still under wraps. I didn't know when this was going to be published. So I've not published anything yet in Gp8. So these all these sort of Chopin stuff, I did this in 7.5. But you see, it looks pretty even right here. There's no complaints with crowding. But there were some issues that I ran across transcribing this in 7.5 that I can now fix with Gp8. So this is solving a problem for me, which is what technology is supposed to do. So it does save me time. It does solve a problem for me, and I'll explain that in just a second. My recording's about to cut off. Gp8 is solving some problems that I ran across when I was transcribing these in 7.6. So, like, I will be going back and making sure that I represented these properly, because they could sound a lot better. So there is a notable difference in how you can notate for piano. The biggest thing I would say, the two biggest things for, like, I wish this was included. Maybe it isn't, I'm not seeing it, but one of the things that I had issues with when I was trying to transcribe the piano stuff into Guitar Pro was, like, when you do the, like, hand crossover kind of stuff, compared to, like, traditional classical sheet music, in those kind of things, you can actually change from, like, bass clef to treble clef mid-measure in the way that classical was notated back, like, 1930s or earlier than that we still use those documents today. Like, if you Google search Chopin, like, you know, fantasy impromptu or something like that, and you pull up like this old scanned sheet music PDF of it, it's very likely a file from 100 or so years ago. And so this is what I'm comparing this to. I'm not comparing it to like a finale version, but yeah, like the ability to kind of notate crossover between fingers, which is a very common thing with piano. That's something I would like to see maybe in an upgrade, or maybe in a later version of Guitar Pro that I don't think is there yet. They, you know, I'd love for them to speak up if it's already there. I'll probably squeal like a little girl. But the other thing is I left fingerings out when I was doing these because the fingerings available to me through Guitar Pro were like PMAC, which is, you know, like, I don't know the names, but like, you know, these fingers, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 T, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 T, and then PMAC, and there's like other options, but they're all guitar related. Whereas for piano, your fingerings are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that wasn't available, so I just left fingerings out entirely. But also, in piano, you very commonly, especially classical music, you're using the pedal function a lot, and so that needs to be included in the sheet music. And as you can see, I've, like with, you know, with piano notation, you have 2 different text boxes because you have 2 different stabs of music. So in your treble clef, you can like press T, and then you get your text box above the music, and you can put that, you can hang that anywhere that you have a note. So it has to, your text boxes have to be attached to a note or a rest. They won't just exist freestanding. So just FYI, hopefully that speeds up your, you know, your transcription for you. But so anyways, over the bass clef text, you see I had to put ped, which is just like the pedal command. The new version of Guitar Pro 8 now has a pedal option. So let me click it right here so you see, and that's what it should look like. It should be like that script sort of design with an asterisk beside it, and it basically has the same functionality as the let ring command for guitar players. So as far as the program would understand it, that's all it's doing. So like I didn't code any of this, but I would venture to say that it's basically telling the program that. But from a feet on the ground perspective, as a piano player, just telling somebody to let ring doesn't quite make sense, because you don't know, like, if you just let ring and then you like take your foot off the pedal, your fingers have to stay there. They can't go anywhere. Like, it doesn't just let ring like an open string on the guitar does. So having that differentiated from the let ring command, which can also apply to piano, but is more like a guitar player, like a stringed instrument kind of thing, as opposed to a percussive instrument, which a classical piano is technically, while it has strings, it's considered more of a percussive instrument, I think, more technically, because of the hammer system. But yeah, having the pedal command is a big deal. Having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for your fingerings is great. So I would say, as of this update, you can properly use this for piano transcription and it not be lacking. I just feel like professionally that gives you so many more options for such a decent price, you know? Like, yeah, you see how like this stuff has room that I could drag it over, but the bottom one doesn't. Okay, that I'm not too stoked about. Like, I can't really just find my place after zooming in and out as easily. That, maybe it's just operator error. There we go. Okay. Confirmed operator error. Yeah, so I should be able to yeet. See, like, there's things like that, like, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And then you can just like drag that bottom one to make it more even. So happy little fast notes. Let's save that. I don't think that would show up in like the 7.5 version, even though it would open in 7.5. So just be mindful of that when you're exporting, especially if you're exporting for, you know, to sell or for a client or something like that. So just know, like, you know, it's going to show up differently in Guitar Pro 8 than it is in Guitar Pro 7, even though they're both .gp files. So, like, if I save this, because I worked on it in Guitar Pro 8, it's still just going to save as a .g, like .gp, just like it would if I was working on it in 7.5 or 7. But as you can see, it's going to show up differently now in Guitar Pro 8. And if you remember earlier on, when I was showing like the Steely Dan stuff, like at the very beginning, that song Home at Last, like when I was showing those at the very beginning, when I opened in Guitar Pro 7.6, it told me like this isn't all that this file is capable of, basically. So yeah, I figured next up I'll I don't want to mess with this one too much, but I can give you a bird's eye view really quickly. I've only done a little bit to sync this up, and you know, back to my point of like, this is a song that was recorded, like the Asia album was done before people used digital audio workstations. So this was recorded all analog, and so you've got Bernard Purdie playing drums here, you know, one of the most competent drummers on the planet, clearly. And even still, when I try and put this on the grid, it's not exact. So, you know, it's kind of a dilemma when you're transcribing something in detail. You know, so this is Home at Last. This is Steely Dan's song I'm a big fan of. And I'm working on it like capo fret 3, E minor, G sort of shapes. So that's where I've got it oriented, but it's in the actual key. So that's important here. This is an imported audio file that I've added. So this is like the actual Asia album version of it that I've just like, I bought it on iTunes, and then you can like go to the ... side of things and like pull up, like find file, search for in Finder, and then you can pull up the actual MP3 file and just drag it into Guitar Pro. That's how easy it is to import these. And it just kind of remembers the pathway. It doesn't like change the file size. So that's just overall kind of how it works. And you can see I'm just like pinching and unpinching with the Mac like that on my trackpad, and that's, I imagine it would be a scroll if you're using a normal mouse, but yeah, that's how it works. And you see it's got like the little let's see, what's the time signature? So this is 12/8, so like 1, 2, 3, 4 things of, it'd be like that sort of shuffle beat. Wrong speed. Let me do, oh yeah, this is another thing, like look at all your BPM controls. Also, if you're new to Guitar Pro, this is very relevant. You have an option to do custom values. So like let's say you wanted to play along with a transcription of a song that's, like, let's say you're learning a Tommy Manuel song and you're like, I want to play it at Tommy's speed, but I'm not there yet. You could go in and like you could highlight like 4 measures or so, and then make sure that it's set on loop, and it'll just like loop those 4 measures until you tell it to stop. And then you can set either a fixed tempo to just like repeat and do monkey see, monkey do with that, or you could set it to where it gradually increases. So kind of like the pacer test, if you went to like the damaged American PE system, it's more pleasant than the pacer test, I will say. You have the option to control all these details now about, like, let's say you're not quite that adept at it and you don't want to start at 70%. Let's say you're just starting at like, I'd say 25% might be good. Like, let's just input 25%. And then let's say you want to get to, so now it's like save that as a potential value that I just want to keep going back to. So let's say you wanted to get it from like 25 to 50 on today's practice session, and you were having trouble with this particular riff. So you could set it up to where like it'll just See, it starts off like super slow. But it would just keep... I'm not going to waste your time, but it could, like every single time that it would repeat through that highlighted section that I added, it would just get incrementally faster until you kind of caught up with it. And in the meantime, like, you can just learn on the fly that way. So it's very helpful for that. And I would argue this is just as much a practice tool as it is, you know, for a lay guitarist, as it is for a professional just, you know, designing transcriptions for their fans or students, you know. So I very much agree with that. I don't think I fully matched the audio file to the document, so it's not quite accurate. As I click further and further through the track, you can see that it's kind of anchored these measure numbers to different spots in the song, and, you know, it's on my task list next to kind of fill out where the different sections in the song are and match it up exactly to each different note and match it up specifically to the pocket of this song. And that was something, you know, I didn't ask specifically for that, but in my notes from the GP7 betas, I really was like, you know, please can we include some serious sort of, like, just hardcore, like, ghost note kind of detail. They knocked it out of the park. And then there's also, I haven't even figured this out yet, and I still haven't even gone through the manual fully yet, but there's apparently also an option where you can fine-tune the timing of each different little grace note. Like, if you really wanted to go that hard about things, you could. And it's just, it feels so good to know that I have that, and that I don't have to work around that in any way and sacrifice quality on what I'm trying to communicate with my music, but also what I'm providing for clients. So I'm tickled about that. You know, you see I've got my global proportions down here. It shows you kind of what the waveform looks like. That just looks nice, you know, to be able to, like, you see like the shorthand of where everything is if you've cataloged it well. That's like super nice. Okay, so here's the manual. As you can see, I've just, you know, talked your ear off about the audio track thing and how that works. But yeah, they use it as, you now have the possibility to add an audio track to a guitar profile. This can be really helpful for transcription work, for example, or allow you to add a vocal track to your score, or even use as a full playback to accompany yourself. And another thing I mentioned that I forgot to get back to was this would be especially helpful, like if you're arranging a song and where it feels good on the guitar, or feels good maybe for your voice, doesn't make sense with the original recording. See, sometimes, like, I'm all about, like, really fast, small feedback loops, because I think you learn faster when you have that option. You know, you think of things like in video games, maybe like Super Smash Brothers, for instance, would be a good example of this, or ping pong, as opposed to baseball. You know, ping pong is like really fast paced, and it's just like you have that sort of very short reaction time to fine tune your stroke pattern and all these details. So I feel like having a song like if you're arranging a song and you have that song in the same key, that to me is a much faster feedback loop, and even more so now that it's integrated into your transcription. I feel like that's a much more fast and short feedback loop by a significant margin than if you're, you know, listening to the track in one key and then trying to like go over here and like practice it in the other key and then going back and forth like that. I feel like this will save you a lot of time to have that in the synths feature, y'all. Okay, so Everybody Wants to Rule the World. If you've ever tried to arrange that with a song, you know it's not A = 440. There are a lot of songs that are not recorded at A = 440. One of the reasons is like tape speeds, and you know, like Billy Joel's first album was recorded too fast, and so he sounds kind of like a chipmunk, you know, and then they like remastered it and fixed it to a certain degree. There are instances like that where songs just aren't at A440, and that just throws a wrench in the system if you're trying, like, you want to be in tune for as many things as possible. It's easier just to stay standard sometimes. And so I find if something's in a really weird tuning or not in 440, I just don't practice it as much because it's hard to get to. There's a lot of resistance between me and doing the thing. So having that option to transpose to synths that's like specific to that file that you're working on is huge, especially for like Everybody Wants to Rule the World would be a good example. And it was a tool that they used in the studio to make a song sound more lively sometimes, is to make it sharp. So FYI. I'll also mention as well, like, since the most recent, like as of this week, the software edits to the audio track that you can add to Guitar Pro. It acknowledges that there's a pickup bar in certain instances. So like I've got a pickup bar right here. I don't have audio track synced to that, but like right here, like it knows that there's a pickup bar. So that would be where the inaccuracies starts. So like, just quick music theory, your pickup bar doesn't have to be the, like, you see my time signature is 12/8. That doesn't apply to like bar 0. Like bar 1 it starts to apply, but to my inaccuracies it does not apply. And if you wanted to add that, it would be right here. Just, you know, fun little fact. So that's a big deal. You have options to really play with the EQing on the, like, there's a lot of EQing options with your virtual instruments on here, but the fact that there's also that with this would be really great for transcribing, like particularly if you are in an instance where you're listening to a full band recording and you're trying to figure out what's going on. But it also has an option for you to, like, I don't want to mess this up by dragging and dropping stuff unnecessarily, but you see it's highlighting little like bits in time that I could like drag it and go all over the place with it. That would be really useful, like if you had a pause that takes a little bit longer than normal. And so like I can think of so many files right now that I can go back and redo because I now have this option. From the, just strictly from a transcription perspective, there's so many files that I can think of that I would want to go back and add that to. Like if there's a fermata, those kind of details, like those kind of details just weren't really well integrated into transcription stuff until now. Like this is really huge to make it sound lifelike. So I'm really excited about that. There's also, I think, been some updates to the palm muting and things like that, which in transcribing fingerstyle, the playback can be a little bit lacking if I'm trying to transcribe. Like, for instance, there are some Tommy songs where like he's using a thumb pick and doing that boom chick pattern, and he's muting just the thumb pick part, and he's letting these notes ring out. I'd be really interested to try that and see if that helps with differentiating that. Nested tuplets is a new thing. Before it was just like just those 5 or those 6 or those 7, and it would show you like a ratio of like this to this many notes, like in a semicolon type thing, like this format basically. So I feel like this is maybe a little bit easier to read shorthand than the way that it was notated before, but also it just presents nicer on the page, so I'm very excited about that. This that's a game changer. So I have a client that unfortunately I've hit a wall with that transcription because I wanted to notate something for them with this kind of thing and I wasn't able to before. So like I'm going to go back and finish that now, because I think my only option at the time was to like do the whole tab, export it as a PDF, then convert those individual pages of PDFs to JPEGs, to then Photoshop this guy's like handwritten chord charts over the top of it, which would mean like I would have to have a separate PDF version from the Guitar Pro interactive version, which would be difficult for differentiating with like file naming and storage, but that would take up a lot of time. So for instance, like let's go back to my copper line arrangement and let's take that out the way. You see here that I've got like let's say I've got like a G sus4 chord here. It's very loosely a G sus chord, you know. I have adjusted for the fact that I've got a capo on, so I've got this little asterisk disclaimer here that chord names imply overall harmony relative to the tuning and the capo position. So for me, that means like this tuning is in G6 tuning with the D in the bass. And it's also like a half step down from everything. So, you know, it's a pretty common tuning that Tommy Manuel uses for a lot of things. So if you come from that ilk, you might recognize that tuning. It's used for like Hawaiian steel type sound. Anyways, if the tuning was just kind of in its normal spot, I wouldn't like have to adjust for the tuning. But the fact that I've got it tuned like a half step down, so like anything that would be normal, that would be left alone from that tuning, that would resemble standard, is now a half step down. So I've adjusted the tuning to account for that, but also to account for the fact that I have a capo on for this particular arrangement. So these chords that I'm listing here, just as a disclaimer, because some jazz buff is going to come in here and be like, that's not actually the chord that you're using. I know. But for all intents and purposes, this is a G sus4 in this context, as far as I'm thinking of it. So I'm aware of that. Let me go ahead and get that out the way now. Anyways, so you have the option to include chords. And I've probably manually named this, but you can see the chord generator recognizes like what note names that you have there. So it's got like, these are the notes that are still ringing out, like the F sharp and the E flat, the C, the G. Okay, so yeah, the chord generator is mostly the same. I think they've added some small improvements to it. I would like to see in the chord generator maybe an option to transpose in the future. As it stands though, it's still very useful. And so my workaround, like let's say if I was in E flat standard and I needed to add my chords, what I would do is actually just go change the tuning back to like E. Keep the fingering as is so that it doesn't move around what I've told it where those notes are on the fretboard. So you see like it's still, all my notes that I put in the tab part are still in the same spot. So it didn't change the chord shapes that I had worked out. It didn't move anything up or down. But you see now it's like E. And I need to change the tonality to match that. So like let's, C should be played as D because I've got capo on 2, and then this, you always have to adjust the key signature after you do that. So it should be A actually. So if we're in standard tuning, capo 2, it should be played like A. So anyways, that's what it should look like. So, but yeah, like there's not a thing in the chord generator yet. There's not a thing in the chord generator as of right now that allows me to translate like I'm thinking in the key of A here. So if I were in a situation where I absolutely needed to do that and I wanted to do it quickly, I could just actually transpose the song back to standard tuning, fill out all my chords, fill out all my chord boxes, and then once I've done all the chords, because that allows you to actually utilize the chord generator. That converting it back to standard for the purpose of inputting the chords and then just converting it back to E flat, if that's what I decide for this song finally. E, from E flat to E, do all my chords while it's in E standard tuning, capo 2. Like it'll recognize the capo, it won't recognize like being tuned down a half step. So it allows, there's not a way yet for it to think through that in terms of like being tuned down, but for the capo it does understand. So like let's say I'm just working, so now it's in standard, but what happens when it's in standard is now it'll show me like what are the potential chord options for it, and it makes sense for how I'm telling the sight reader to think about this. So I'm not having to transpose every single thing by hand. I can just go up in here and say like, okay, it's like these sort of things, and it's suggesting for me all these different potential options based off of what I feel like the key is at that point. So, it's providing based off of the sharps and flats in the actual key signature, but then it's up to you then to decide what the perspective is. Like, does this feel like this kind of chord? Does it feel like, because you're getting into, and not necessarily this chord, but like an augmented chord is like 3 notes that are evenly spaced out between each other. And so it's symmetrical. It could be 3 different note names. It just depends on how you want to think about it. So having the multiple different options like that helps you not overthink it. I don't really play with these kind of things down here, but you know, if you were composing with it, I imagine that would be pretty useful to have those kind of inversions to think through things with. You can really manipulate a lot of details about it here, but the chord generator is mostly the same. I think they've fixed some bugs more than anything, but I don't think they've changed it. This, however, the scale diagram is very new. It is specific to Guitar Pro 8, and for me, it replaces the software that I paid probably $40 for a job that I had last year where they wanted scale diagrams on everything. So the fact that this is included you're saving money by buying this, I'm telling you. If this is what you do, and especially if this is what you do for a living, you're saving money by buying this, because this is included, and this means now that you can include all these scale diagrams in a file that is interactive. So you have one more item to sell in your store, for instance, and you are better able to communicate your ideas to your students or to sight readers. So that's a big deal. And you can, as you can see, you can go through and like you do all kind of Toast Nabasi, Lenny Bro kind of stuff with this. You could show like the whole neck if you wanted to do multiple different degrees of a scale altogether, but then you could like you could just make up whatever you want. So if you've got your own ideas about how you want to present a chord or like possible improvisation options around that voicing, and you don't just have like dots, you have like squares. So like you could, do you have squares? Yeah, you've got squares. So you could, you could create a codified system if you wanted to, and just maybe include those details in like a big text box at the beginning of your document. So like, you could go to the first measure and kind of create like a key essentially of this means this, this means this. You see that with drum percussion notation. It's redundant. You see that with percussion notation quite often, that like this pitch is assigned to this particular like snare, or this drum head, or this location on my drum head. Like, so, I personally have used this. I've seen it used, particularly, I mean like the key. Like when I've done some random key stuff, like I made sure to include a key of like this percussion thing equates to this string with a rhythmic detail on it. So, but yeah, you can see like this makes no sense. This thing right here, like this doesn't correlate to anything, but I could, so yeah, as I was saying before, I like got all shocked by like color options. I don't really know what I'm doing with this, quite obviously. Yeah. Oh, so the text is that color, I think. Diagram title, yeah. But like I can add all these, I guess. Okay, so I can pick the color. Yes! That's amazing. This is so cool, y'all. I mean, you could do like some Keith Haring or something in the middle of your tabs if that's your thing. But yeah, no, in all seriousness though, you could, like, let's say you're somebody like Ted Green and you have a specific way of notating chord voicings to show like alternatives that you can improvise over the top of a chord progression. Like, this would be incredibly applicable for something like that. So that's a big deal, and that was one of the bigger features that Guitar Pro 8 came out with. Also an option, I've played with this a little bit, but what they've done here is Guitar Pro 7 had distortion pedals and effects pedals and reverb and compression and all that you could add to your virtual track. So like, let's say, and I used this when I was doing a lot of the transcriptions for Tommy Emmanuel, I'd say like mid 2020, I spoke with his manager and we decided to release the interactive versions of all of the tabs. So the start of 2020, we released all the songs as PDFs, but then August 2020, we also released the Guitar Pro like GPX equivalents. So you can actually go to his TrueFire personal channel and buy my Guitar Pro files that I did for him that are like uncompressed. It almost looks the exact same as my original that I keep backups of. So like that's what I study with. So I mean, there's not anything being held back on those, is I guess what I'm saying. But one of the things that I did with that is like, as a fan of his music, I have like different benchmarks of his tone that I am a fan of. So like the tone of his recordings that he did with Mark DeSisto on It's Never Too Late and on the Tommy Songs album, the tone of those is very different from how Kim Person mixed, and also the gear he was using for the Center Stage DVD from 2007. So one of the things that I was able to do with the Guitar Pro 7 capabilities then was like I was able to EQ, like for instance, the Finger Lakes and some songs off of Center Stage. I was able to add this sort of effects and EQing type options that he used on those songs. And then, you know, it's a different tone entirely from the studio sound on the Mystery album. And I think Kim Person recorded that as well. But that's also, you know, it's a different sound than like a live album would be. So it allowed me to get a tone that was closer to the tone of that particular reference song. So that was really helpful. And you know, I haven't played with the effects very much on this. And this is where your pedal board section would be. I could change the voice of it to an electric guitar, for instance, and just do like a clean guitar. Like let's start with that and just I'm doing this. This is all news to me. Just playing around with it. So let's do clean guitar, clean Strat, do like extra clean. Okay, so, you know, that's just how it sounds, and then we can add, so this is the effect chain that they already put on that characteristic of song, so you could actually, like you can go down here, show pedal board, and this shows you your signal chain from like right to left, which is how it would be on a pedal board, unless you had it all jumbled up, but your signal with guitar pedals goes right to left. So yeah, it shows you like these kind of things. I think you could add I don't know. Oh, what? I could do that? Let's just be dumb. Let's just be really dumb right now. I'm sorry in advance. Okay, so you've actually got I like that. That's like really nice organization that you have it just on the current track, but then you've also got the option to do like yeah, your post-production kind of mixing and mastering stuff. So yeah, that's pretty awesome. Pretty good layout. But yeah, you've got some really nice options with that you can. Honestly, I do think like the clipping is more coming from the fact that I'm screen recording, so I don't want to look like the program is causing that. But yeah, that's just where it is. I don't think it's meant to be a replacement for like an IR. It's not meant to be a replacement for you actually playing music. So I don't think this is at a stage where it replaces people yet. At least not to my ear. My ear's gotten much better, I would say, since transcribing, but even still, like, even if I did the transcription myself, and then just like if you could somehow wipe my memory and then play that finished product back to me, with no recollection that I had done that file, I still would be like, yeah, that's fake. So, and I'm not saying I'm the best, but I'm just saying, like, it would be really, really hard to fool someone who is a guitar player, I think, into thinking. You'd have to, like, have all kind of extra stuff in the track around it to make it sound convincing. So I don't feel like this is a replacement for, like, someone just actually playing music, you know. So, you know, robots aren't quite coming for your job yet. Just chill. Next up on the list, we have the command palette. This tool allows you to write what you want to edit on the command line. It can greatly improve the editing speed. I'm excited about this. I haven't tried it yet. So Control-E shortcut is how you'd find it. I don't know that I would use this as much, come to think of it, but yeah, like if you had a specific picking pattern that stayed the same and you just wanted to just tell the song en masse, you know, highlight these measures and just say this is the picking pattern for it, this would be ideal. I find that copy paste and then just knowing hotkeys is good enough for me, but I might find myself using this. Although I will say, like, if you look right here, you see the this kind of thing with a little V-shaped thing is an upstroke, and the D-shaped thing, like a D on its side, is that is a downstroke. So that's, you know, just you have that there. But like these little things, like the downstroke in parentheses or the upstroke in parentheses, I would just go in and take those out personally. If you are playing around with using these and they're giving you the little parentheses like that, it's because it's like a tie, like you see right here, like those, that's the same note, it's just tied over that spot in the song to like 1, 2, 3, 4 beats in the song. So they have subdivided it, like it's an eighth note, but they've subdivided it into 2/16 notes because it crosses over between beat 2 and beat 3. So that's just a shorthand sort of way to sight read and still get an overview of what the rhythm pattern is. And, you know, so it's a pretty common thing, but yeah, so it's the same note. It's just split into two for a formatting thing for sight reading. But, like you could take that out, like you're not going to be picking it. So I would personally take that out. But like you see that a lot, like maybe if you're doing something with 2 voicings, it's very likely that, you know, if you don't isolate your voicings and just edit voicing 1 at a time or voicing 2 at one time, like if you've got multi-voice turned on and you're trying to add the upstrokes and the downstrokes, you're likely going to encounter this problem where you add things and then like they have parentheses around them. So if you isolate your voicings, you can prevent that. And also, if you want the voicings to be like, let me go back to this. If you want the voicings to just be on the top, like let's say, hypothetically, you're doing a multi-voice song, and like, okay, so there's a song that I won't name because I don't know if it's published yet, at least not the transcription, but it is a hybrid picking song. And I think there's only like one moment in the song where he does like the pick and the ring finger at the same time. Everything else is just with the pick. But still, with this particular song, the melody line is in the bass line part. So the melody line is where the bass line should normally be. Like that's carrying the song. The rhythm section is the high notes. So it's a little unconventional in that sense. And so what I did to notate that is I actually broke that song down into 4 different voicings, even though he's playing that with a single pick the whole time, except for that one little note. And the reason I did that is because you can divide like I was able to differentiate like what's the melody from what's the fill notes by deciding like what side of the tab stuff that the upstrokes and downstrokes will be on, and they attach to the top or the bottom based on what voicing that they were assigned to. So if you assign that to voicings 2 or 4, it's going to be on the bottom of the tab. And then if you assign them to voices 1 and 3, they're going to be on the top of the tab. But if you like do multi-voice again, and yeah, that would be interesting if you're doing practice sessions or something like that. The way some people write, I do figure it could be useful for that. I don't know that I would find myself using that all that much. The design mode improvements, I feel like we've already gone over that pretty well, so I won't repeat that. The drum mix, this is not something I ran across when I was alpha testing, so that's new to me. Oh, that's cool. So you can kind of place the drums in the mix in a way that's a bit more detailed, instead of it all just being like mono, I guess. Yeah, you can do stereo like panning with that to create kind of like a mix where you feel like you're in the center of it, you know, rather than just everything blasting out at you through a speaker. So the focus, unfocus. Audio note settings. So it is now possible to apply a custom offset, duration, or velocity to the note, or on a selection. You can find this option via audio note settings menu. Each modification is applied to the theoretical value of what the note without taking into account the other effects the chord note responds to 480 ticks. A custom offset, duration, or velocity to the note, or on a selection. So you could like highlight something and dictate that for all of it. So that would be good too for, like, let's say you didn't have an audio track attached to your transcription, but there was like a fermata, or like maybe there was a ghost note that's like a very specific value that's just a bit off. Like you could fine tune and notate that kind of stuff independent of whether there's like an audio track attached. So that's super helpful. That's something I wish I would have had before, and I still haven't tested it yet. So let's actually see if we can. I can think already right here there's somewhere that I might play with that. So at the intro to this, I kind of stagger the notes just barely. It just, you hear them a little bit better if you do that. It's just something that I think mimics a voice crack a little bit, so it's just, so yeah, so let's focus on this one right here and see if we can. So it's a note. Was it audio note settings? Yeah. Okay, so like, yeah, I still want it to be the same distance, relative velocity. So I guess that would just be like how loud or quiet it is. Let me try this one maybe. Make sure I'm not missing any new details. Yeah, otherwise that section still looks the same. Okay, so this one is letting me offset. I'm guessing it's because it's like in the middle of a measure. So let's try 5 ticks just to be crazy. Let's cut the metronome on so we can really hear that. That was pretty mild. That's something I figure you'd want it to, okay, so like intervals of 5, so let's try that. I don't know, maybe I'm not using it right. I don't quite feel like there's a huge difference there. I'm just going to chalk that up to operator error. So, anyways, get back to the user guide, move on. So, quarter note. Okay, there you go. Like a quarter note responds to 40 ticks. So, I was just operating in such small margins that it was just unnoticeable. So, there you go. Let's let's be obnoxious then and do 480 ticks. Okay, so Shift F is the, let's do 240. Shift F is the, I don't think it'll let me do that. Let's see maximum possible, 60 ticks. Okay, I heard that. That was just like a little bit of a jolt. So, yeah, I'm good with that. Cool. Let me undo that real quick. I like that. And it still, I think it still stayed within the boundaries of, you're able to actually use a line in from a guitar, so you can like lock the sound to keep it even if you change the track or file. Piano fingerings, as I mentioned earlier. It's not the end of it. My poor laptop. It's not liking all this stuff open at the same time. Piano pedal indications. So yeah, like you could highlight multiple things and then press the pedal command to create that sort of phrasing thing right there. I already went over some of the tempo automations, so it was already pretty good, and then they just made it better. So if you bought Guitar Pro 7, you would still have that gradual tempo increase, but it wouldn't be as customizable. This is pretty cool right here, the copy and paste improvement. So, this sounds so lame. If you have to copy and paste, which is pretty necessary. That's like a big part of your job with this. But so in the past, like let's say you've got a passage of a song that you've already fleshed out, the expression details, you've already fleshed out the notes, the rhythmic values of the notes, all these kind of things, and you've got chord diagrams above it that you've already decided, like, this is how I want the chords to be represented, you know? So if you've gotten to that stage of transcribing where you've already included all the bells and whistles beyond just the meat and potatoes, it gets hairy to try and, like, copy and paste, like, if you make a mistake somewhere else, or maybe if there's, like, a repeat section that's just different enough that you do have to start a new section entirely instead of using repeat symbols. In those kind of instances, it can be a little bit hairy to copy and paste. So let me take a song, for instance, that's got all those details already. So in the old version, you had to do a special paste option. So where is it? Paste. Yeah, like in the old version, if you were to share something that had those kind of details above it, like chord names or that kind of stuff, you would have to do a special paste, which you still have the option to do here. So for instance, let me go ahead and just do that so that you can see it. Somebody's gonna be out here stealing my ideas. At least this on video that is my doing first. Okay, so let's take this crazy section right here with the A5 with the E in the bass and the E5 to a B. Just add some extra random stuff out here. Scrap measures. Yeah, and let's just paste it right there. Come on, bro. You see it like took away the chords. What I could do is like edit, special paste, and then you have all these. Okay, those are new, like the master automations in the sections. That's new. That wasn't in the old one, and I don't think that's in the what's new features, so that's cool. That would be like really a big deal. Like if you didn't have that and you had to reproduce something like that, it would be very time consuming, I figure. But yeah, so like if you had text boxes or timers, automations, chords, scale diagrams on See there, it manifested, and this time, you know, side by side, you've got the chord names there. What you could do now, I suppose, is go to Preferences with the new version. I'm learning this along with you guys, so. Score. There it is, right there. Alright, let's copy paste real quick before my timer runs out on the recorder thing. Look at that. So like you could set that as a default for it to do a special paste anytime you asked it to. That's a time saver, I can tell you right now. So yeah, pretty much everything they've listed so far is actually significant in terms of actually making it easier to use, saving you time, especially if, you know, if you're doing batch editing and things like that. This is going to be super helpful for you. So you can filter songs easier with their My Songbook thing. I don't personally use that a whole lot, but it is pretty solid. I mean, they've got a lot of songs on there if you do want to learn stuff. Visual metronome and visual countdown. Cool. Yeah, like it's nice just to have a little bit fancier of a metronome, especially if you like I hook up my computer to the piano and I'll just practice with like the audio files on the, like I'll practice with YouTube or something, just running an aux chord. So to have that kind of thing built in, just a little bit more metronome controls is really cool. You pin recent files, just some database things that make it easier to access files. Quarter tone on tremolo bar, so you get a little bit more sensitive. That would be super helpful for like blues soloing and transcribing that accurately. Because people are so particular about how they use tremolo. So I imagine that would be pretty cool. Sound preview during playback. Oh, that's neat. So you don't have to like actually change the voicing to test it. That's cool. Improved PNG and PDF export. I think the automatic syntax for naming your files would be helpful. Choose a resolution, export only the selection, export on a transparent background, as I mentioned previously. Super helpful again. I think the exporting just an excerpt of it is going to be huge for like publishing, because I remember like I've had to do some documents for Premiere Guitar before where like I have to send a different guitar profile for every exercise in that guitar lesson I do, and there's like 12 exercises, so you end up with this folder with just like tons of separate files and then tons of different little bits. And I mean, they want uncompressed files in that instance, I think, but so you get some slashes in drum notation. I can't tell you what to do with that. I'm not a drummer. Courtesy accidentals. I've heard a lot of people complain that wasn't there, so I know they'll be excited. That was one thing that I also ran across when I was doing like the piano notation. Like when I was retranscribing a lot of that, like the accidental that Guitar Pro would choose would be different than what was notated in there, I guess based off of scale information, you know. Modifying the selection on the score, so apparently you can like highlight and resize using the mouse. I've not tried that yet. I trust that it's working. Triple click instead of Control A will allow you to select the entire track. Shortcuts and modifying speed. Some hotkeys for... Okay, so I think that's the bulk of the new stuff. The price difference, I don't know, I think it's only like $10 or $15 difference between 7.5 and maybe not even that, between 7.5 and 8. So, you know, if you're already interested in buying Guitar Pro, just buy version 8. Like, it's just so much easier to work with. Just a little bit that I've had it, and I feel like you'll get a lot more mileage out of it if you do. yeah, I'm so glad that it's out, because it's been really hard for me to keep it to myself that it's there and that it's so cool and that it solves so many problems for me. So, yeah, and if there's anything else you want to know about the program, if you want to see me explain certain details about it, if you have any questions, doesn't matter the skill level, if you want me to kind of cover some topics with it, just let me know, and just tell me in the comments what you thought. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if this is something you want to keep up with. It really does help the channel, and it gives me more incentive to post more. So thanks so much for watching. I think I'm going to edit this and publish it pretty quickly, because I've covered pretty much everything, so